The HP Compaq line of computers was an iconic staple of Windows XP and early Windows 7 era computing. Being business desktops that were not made by Compaq, they're relatively commonplace and can be found in all sorts of places like liquidation lots and eBay for not too much money. Most of the time. Being composed of both the desktops and laptops, I'm pretty sure you've seen one. But why does this PC look like an HP Compaq but has the Compaq logo? It has 2 serial ports? And how well does this thing hold up? Those are some great questions, so let's get started. To go into some detail on what this thing is, it is a Compaq Evo D500, the predecessor to the HP Compaq line, or at least a nameplate. And it was quite an interesting nameplate, with its context going all the way back to the 80s for being such a short-lived nameplate. The Evo line was the result of the consolidation of the Deskpro, Armada, and Personal Workstation lines of computers. The Compaq Deskpro was a line of desktops that dates back to the 80s, with some notable models such as the Deskpro 386. The Armada consisted of Compaq's business laptops, and the Personal Workstation was, well, workstations. Compaq had been competing in a price war against Dell, and the entry-level Compaq Evo 300V was offered starting at $499. Which blew Dell's Optiplex lines out of the water. Now, prices went up from there, and the Evo D500 was offered starting at $719, but Compaq's goal was not to compete with Dell in this case, but to rather compete with eMachines and Gateway, who were offering more budget-friendly PCs, even if eMachines was all more oriented towards home. Compaq also was not doing the best financially at this point. After snubbing the market predictions in 1998, after acquisition after acquisition after acquisition, and constantly waging price wars, their actions were starting to take their toll. Enter Hewlett-Packard, a PC company that proposed to merge with Compaq. This company would be dangerously powerful, offering the popular and iconic Compaq desktops alongside HP's well-known printers that were often at the time highly regarded because they didn't have subscription printer ink. This merger was proposed in late 2001 and was finalized in the middle of 2002. And in hindsight, nobody in the market really needed to be concerned, because Compaq would be assimilated into HP. And a great example of what I'm talking about is the fact that the Evo line of desktops and other computers was discontinued in 2003 and replaced by the HP Compaq line of computers. This was after in 2002 the line replaced the Omnibook line of laptops, Vectra line of desktops, and Kayak line of workstations, which were HP's models. But anyway, for some press insight and stuff, the Think Client model was highly regarded, with a lot of people praising its optional integrated Bluetooth, something that we may take for granted today, but back in 2001 was quite a new and groundbreaking technology, as well as its relatively thin design. Alas, I don't have the Thin Client here today, and you'd probably be seeing this video a lot earlier if I had a Thin Client version. As for the configuration here, it would have been offered starting at, I think, around $849. This was offered with a 2 GHz Intel Pentium 4, not a 1.5 or 1.71 mentioned here, 256 megabytes of PC 133 SD RAM, and an Nvidia Vanta 16 megabytes. Hey, it's a dedicated graphics card for once, but one that was based off of older generation technology. So anyway, what's the technical scope of this thing? So on the front, we have the CD-ROM drive, the floppy drive, audio jacks, USB, and the power button. Turning it around to the rear, there's the power supply, more audio jacks, 2 more USB ports, COM1 serial, VGA, Ethernet, a parallel port, COM2 serial, and PS2 ports. Not to forget that there's 2 expansion slots here. Additional note, on the case here, you can tell which port goes to where with color-coded spots for the serial ports, keyboard, audio jacks, and more. And even if you had onboard video, it shows a great difference between where you would put an AGP card. At least I think this is this AGP? Okay, I'm right. In terms of the condition of the thing, it's in fairly decent condition. There are a couple scuffs and chipped paint in areas, but I honestly can't do much about it. It's really only accumulated like dust in areas on the cover, and I don't really see much of an issue with that because that can just be wiped off easily, and I already did that before I recorded this video. If I wanted to, I could probably try to maybe find some paint to paint over some of these areas that are missing some paint, but it isn't too detrimental to me. And you can also see where a previous owner probably would have had a monitor on this thing. I'd presume maybe a CRT based on the positioning of this, but I can't be 100% sure because I don't know where this thing came from apart from the seller that I got it from. Now, to open this thing up, if you remember my video on the ThinkCenter M73 tiny bit back, it's basically a similar process, except without thumb screws. There are two tabs on the side of the case that you push inwards, and then basically you slide the front part of the case off as one whole giant assembly, revealing the internals. You'll probably notice something interesting here in that if you get a good enough glimpse, it's not easy with my camera positioning, there's a riser card in here. Now, these aren't always the most common, however, they seem to be more common on SFF computers and a lot of these slim cases, and it makes sense. I've never fully paid attention to them, but it is worth noting that. There's also the aforementioned Nvidia Vanta card, as this thing does not have onboard video. The CD-ROM drive is from Compaq, not really too much to go over there. I think the website said it was a 48-speed drive, but I can't be 100% sure. And the hard drive that I put in here is a 40GB Western Digital drive. The assembly containing the CD drive and the hard drive can be lifted up without too much issue. You just pull some more latches and it'll pop right up, giving you more access to the internals. In here there's RAM, which is PC133 SD RAM, and the Intel Pentium 4 in the socket. Although I will say, this does look very proprietary, and that's probably because it is. I mean, let's be honest, how often are you going to see RAM slots that look like this? Or this interestingly shaped power supply? Well, on the side, you can see the speaker, not going to be of use here, and getting this thing back together includes safely pushing the drive assembly back into place, and so not like what I did here. And ensuring that all the tabs on the side of the cover are properly aligned and stuff, and it all goes back together in one piece. Just ensure that everything snaps in place, and it's time to now use this thing. As for the OS choice, I put Windows 2000 Professional on here, specifically from the recovery media, and because I think that this PC may be a bit more adequate with Windows 2000. And I'm going to start with some performance stuff. Primarily, for the first time ever, a successful 3D Mark benchmark test. This is specifically 3D Mark 2000, and it may be marred by the fact that it is using Windows 2000 instead of Windows 98, as that can alter the 3D Mark scores by a slight bit, but the score provided here was a unknown 1,858 3D Marks. I suppose this will be a baseline, at least for the time being, until I can get more stuff that uses 3D Mark 2000 for benchmarks, but hey, it is what it is. Now, I do have a couple programs and games installed on here, and unfortunately Microsoft Office 2000 isn't really gonna cut it with measuring performance with this thing. But you know what will? Adobe Photoshop 6. A Gaussian blur here with a live preview rendered instantly, while resizing the image to 10 times its original size, at least I think it's 10 times the original size, took around 20 seconds, maybe a few more or less seconds. I wasn't really keeping track, and I was eating dinner during the recording process, so I don't have much else to really go over in the desktop everyday use compartment because I'm not really trusting YouTube and Chameleon on this PC, especially since it's 2000 Service Pack 2. Bejeweled runs relatively well. That's not too much of a surprise because it usually runs well on anything I throw at it. This isn't that hefty of a game, and I've even gotten it running properly and well on a Pentium 2 laptop a couple weeks ago. Since it's relatively ordinary and I often look at Bejeweled, I'm not going to go into it in too much detail. Railroad Tycoon 2 also runs relatively well. This is a Platinum version, which contains stuff like the Second Century expansion pack and several user-created maps. And I'm using it here because it says it'll work on XP, and so I presume that it'll also work on 2000, and it does, even if it didn't say so on the box. I use the same sorts of settings as my Windows 98 and 2006 video, however, I find it slightly difficult, and again, I do want to spend time playing this game because I think it's kind of cool. And how about Diablo 2? Like the previous two games, this game was relatively new when this PC was built. And obviously I'm opting for the Necromancer here, because who doesn't like summoning skeletons? I got a bit further and ended up in a cave with quite a few intimidating opponents, but I mean, I was able to beat one. This PC can run this game relatively well, so I don't have too much to say here. Another game I'm not going to go into too much detail on is Age of Empires. You're probably noticing that I'm not going into too much detail on a lot of these games because I'm saving a lot of detail for the next game. But using a deathmatch here and using a cheat code to get several Camaros did help me beat the opponent in this huge map deathmatch. It should also be said that the music did cause the game to just freeze for a second, but I don't think that's related to this PC because I've had this issue happen on other PCs, particularly ones that are playing the game on 2000. I'm not going to compare this to the Dell Dimension 2100 because you'll notice that on a lot of these games, they're running relatively well, but they're also limited in their 3D scope. Sure, they may have 3D graphics, but it's all in isometric graphics and stuff. Railroad Tycoon 2 does allow for the game's camera to be moved, but still, I have a point. And that's because this PC can't really handle a proper 3D game that well. I haven't really tested much in this department, but Half-Life is our benchmark. And boy oh boy, these frames. Normally I associate a lot more of the lagginess with more on-screen enemies or objects and stuff, because self-explanatory, but this thing just is a whole nother level. I didn't even need to go too far into the game when I wasn't really feeling much like playing games at that point in the night, because even in an introduction, it was laggy. For this, let's do a side-by-side comparison with the Dell Dimension 2100, a PC that I already benchmarked in the production of this video, and has less than half the 3D Mark score as the Compaq Evo. Both of these games are running at 1024x768 resolution on a 1280x1024 monitor, and it's no contest, which is even more of a shocker given that the Dell has an Intel Celeron only just over half as fast as the Compaq's processor, as well as integrated graphics. But I think that should give you an idea of the performance between these two systems on this game, and maybe the Socket 370 integrated graphics have better 3D rendering than an Nvidia Vanta 16 megabytes. I do know that some graphics cards like this Matrox Millennium are designed with some workstation use more in mind compared to gaming, and the Nvidia Vanta might be similar to that because this is an office PC, but I don't really know, and that's going to be it for the main stuff. So to conclude, the Compaq Evo D500 is a relatively decent PC, easily beating previous gen hardware in benchmarks even if it falls short in gaming. And this thing arguably is to an extent a good explanation on why I collect computers. This may not seem like the most unique thing or the most special thing, but to me it feels like this has a lot of historical value in more minute ways, although something I wouldn't put a heavy price tag on. For a 2000 machine, even though this thing came with XP from the factory, it is relatively solid, and I think that this will likely be my second in command for Windows 2000 computers, at least desktop ones, because obviously my Dell Dimension 3000, which is my main 2000 machine, beats this thing without much question. However, this thing differs from that Dell in that this Compaq has relatively good shape when it comes to its capacitors. The Dell Dimension 3000, on the other hand, has bulging capacitors and it's probably overdue for recapping at some point. Now I should say that you should not always expect old computers to have good capacitors, and this thing could very easily have been recapped at some point, but still I have a point to make, and if this thing doesn't satisfy my Windows 2000 PC requirements or needs, I could easily use this thing for, say, my OS dev testing fleet or my weird experiments testing fleet. After all, I've got to find ways to use all these bajillion computers I have. Anyway, did you have one of these back in the day or did you use one? If so, what's your thoughts on it? Do you think that it'd be worthwhile to use XP on this thing if it had a RAM upgrade? Do you think I should look at more Windows 2000 computers in the future? Is there a computer from my collection that you'd be interested in me looking at, or something that I should try to look for? I just found this thing on the whim, and I'm open to suggestions on what I should look at, as long as it's affordable enough for me. Did you enjoy this video, or is there something I forgot to address, or something I could do to improve my content? If you have anything to say, feel free to let me know down below in the comments, or through my email, and feel free to give this video a like. But that's going to do it for this video, so thanks for watching, and have a nice day.